All right, everyone, it's Damon here. A beautiful Sunday evening right here in Central Texas. We've got Trey back from the dead. As you can see, he's ghostly white. And then you've got Daniel, of course, over here, always a guest on the always now a host, co-host rather, on the MBTV live shows. And we got a few ISFPs going to pop in and out. Some technical difficulties, so we're starting about 8 minutes late. But that being said, I want you guys to know that we are going to be talking about ISFPs. And one of our very first questions is, what the hell is an ISFP? So Daniel, let's start this off with you. What is an ISFP to you?
An ISFP to me is an enigma. It is an individual with potential artistic abilities, mysticism of the introverted feeling realm, spontaneous in nature, yet very sincere, respectful, and appreciating of people around them.
Okay. All right. And Trey, what do you think an ISFP is?
Actually, personally, ISFPs have always been a mystery. I've never necessarily been able to say that I have had a friend that I know to be ISFP or anything like that. So for me, I haven't really gotten a lot of chances to, I guess, directly study an ISFP or even really understand. I mean, I understand their cognitive functions, so I have an idea, but I'm not going to have like a real life experience with an ISFP.
All right, so guys, ISFPs in the Gamma Quadra. So they are the exact opposite of functions of the NTJ. Well, the same functions, but in an opposite order. Starting out with introverted feeling, leading with extroverted sensing, then introverted intuition, and then extroverted thinking. So given this, there's a lot of confusion on ISFP, INFP, and INFP, INFJ. So these are the two common, this little group of these F feeler, introverted feeler, INFs, ISFs, it gets really messy. So we're going to try to look at some live examples of ISFPs or people who identify with ISFP and why they do that. Now, I've made it a INFP ISFP video a few weeks ago that was published. So if you guys haven't seen that, it'd probably be good to watch after the show so you guys are aware of what an ISFP, some differences between INFP and ISFP, and kind of what to look out for. I had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Dario Nardi earlier today, and we had a pretty lengthy discussion as well regarding ISFPs versus INFPs and kind of some differences that really stand out. And he mentioned about, talking about the benefactor relationships in Socionics, and that's a good way to identify it, as well as the focus of attention, where the ISFP engages, disengages, engages, disengages, engages, disengages, and the INFP tends to engage in listening much more long and has a much more lengthy engagement as far as listening goes in general. There's a lot of information on that. Hopefully we'll get a ISFP here in a second. Like I said, there were some technical difficulties, and I will get him talking a little bit about his experience. I believe that Stephen, our guest for ISFP, also formerly identified with INFP before he changed and recognized, well, I don't want to say change because it's not like he changed, but he recognized that he identified more with ISFP. And we're going to talk about that because that's going to give a good example of maybe how one may lean one way or another. So one of the main things that I see that people talk about quite a bit is that, it's either I'm intuitive or I'm sensing, and that really is kind of really basic because, and I mean that in the nicest way, because it's basic. Both types use intuition. One has it in the tertiary slot, one has it in the auxiliary slot, and vice versa. One has the sensing in the auxiliary slot and the intuition slot. So you have both, one using SE, one using SI, one using NE, and one using NI. So this can be quite confusing because the dominant function is the same. So they look very similar. You're going to see a lot of similarities as far as adherence to values go. And so it can be very mixed up for a lot of people. The key to figuring this out is to look at which piece of information you trust the most. That's really the key, is what piece of information do I trust the most? What comes across my plate? What do I identify with more? Do I trust sensing information more, or do I trust intuition information more? Okay, try not to get into the deep discussions of NI and SE and SI. And if you do, it's going to be pretty messy. Hey, welcome.
Hi.
All right. So I had the pleasure of, working with Andrea here a while ago and helping her identify with ISFP previously. So I am glad that you're here. And we were just talking about a little bit of differences between the ISFP and INFP. So I don't mean to throw the spotlight on you, but you are the only ISFP in here right now. We have another one coming. He's just figuring out. We had some technical difficulties earlier. So
Okay.
that being said, I know that you had a toss-up between INFP and ISFP previously. What really helped clear that up for you besides, obviously talking to me, but but I mean, in general, what was it that helped you clear that up? So,
Um, I think it was mainly the way that I process information, I guess. I mean, just thinking off the top of my head, like you had said, the difference between do you trust your intuition more or do you trust like concrete information more? I think that was kind of what decided it for me was I I trust more concrete facts and, things like that over more I trust that more over abstract ideas, I guess.
mhm.
So
Great. Well,
that's kind of what did it for me.
perfect. Stephen, are you clear?
Hello. Yes,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think I am finally.
Great. Glad to have you. So now that you sound
Thank
like
you.
a human
Appreciate it.
and not a robot, we can ask you the question. We were just talking
Sounds
about
good.
INFP and ISFP and a little bit of differences.
Right.
And I know that you formally identified with INFP. I would like to know what caused the switch. I didn't get the opportunity to really work with you, so I'm curious to what made you recognize that you preferred ISFP.
Right. That's a good question. So when I first started my MBTI journey, initially, I was about 14 years old. I was a freshman in high school. And that was really my first exposure to MBTI. And I took an exam and I first tested as an INTJ, believe it or not. And then a few years after that, I came in contact with MBTI again through a really weird way, actually. I was reviewing some headphones, or I was wanting to know more about headphones. And I came across this video that Trey made about something known as the, you might recognize these, Trey.
No
Right here.
way. Is that how you
Yeah,
found
so
my
I
video?
saw that review. It's the Audio Technica M50X. I was like, wow, this guy's pretty cool. I think I want to watch some more of his videos. And I stumbled upon a lot of his MBTI stuff. And that's really where I had my, not my first exposure, but where I delved into it at a deeper level and start to understand it more. And that's where, like 3 months after, I decided I was an INFP, or that's what I related to the most. And so going back to what you said, Chad, or Damon, it was really, the biggest thing for me was SI, because I related a lot to SI. I use it a lot. And even though you can be good at a function, that doesn't necessarily mean it can be part of what your type is, because being good or bad at a function doesn't necessarily indicate what it is. It's more about how you use it, like how much you use it. And I use SI a lot. And so that was really the biggest thing for me. And then another thing was my NE, because I had this stumbling block where I was confusing NE with NI primarily through how much I would zone out on things, if that makes sense. So INFPs are often labeled as dreamers because they feel like they're in this other world where they're not really present. And so I felt like I had that a lot, but it was confused with NI in the sense where it was like a loop between SC and NI, what I realized later, because I was so focused on a particular thing. I call it tunnel vision. That's the metaphor I use for it, where I'm just so honed in on something, it's hard for me to change gears. And if I'm focused on it, like let's say I like to make music through software like Ableton Live and FL Studio and things like that. And sometimes I'll just be so focused on it. I'll be eating dinner and it's like all I'm thinking about it. People will be talking to me and it just goes right through my head. And so I sort of related to that, but it wasn't NE that was causing that. It was just me being focused on something so hard that I think I misunderstood it. And that was one of the biggest obstacles. And Another thing was SE. I think I had a misunderstanding of SE for the longest time. What I realized later on was that I used SE a lot more than I initially thought. And I think...
Oh, man. That was like the worst.
That was like the best. That was the bread and butter right there.
I mean, come on. Oh, man, that's awful. All right. Well, let's hope he comes back. And
Statue now.
yeah, I know, right? That was like, and it was right at the pinnacle. Okay,
Right.
so when Steven comes back, we'll have him answer the rest of that question. But the key here is what he was getting at is one of the things you got to look at is your polar function or your point of least resistance function. If you're looking at INFP versus ISFP, you can figure this out pretty easily. For the INFP, their polar function is SE. It's the function that they're the worst at. And that's the function they struggle with the most is SE. So if you find yourself using SE quite a bit, and as in what it is, and if you understand SE, you're probably ISFP, not INFP. It's just that's the kind of the yielder that kind of shows you. Whereas if you are ISFP, you know your polar function is NE. So if you find yourself using NE, it's probably your INFP. So that's the key is which one you struggle with, NE or SE, and that kind of really yields the type. Hopefully Steven's back, and if he's back, then we will finish what he was saying. But yeah, so take a look at your point of least resistance function, and that's the function that's really going to yield the type for you. In a lot of ways, it's being able to look at that. So is it SE or is it NE, which is the function that you struggle with? It's your seventh function if you look at a 8-function stack model. Or it's your tertiary function, the opposite attitude of your tertiary function if you're looking at the 4-stack model. All right, so whatever that is, it's the opposite attitude of your tertiary function. So obviously, Trey, his polar function is TE. Daniel's polar function is SI, mine's SI as well. So these are our functions that we tend to struggle with quite a bit. And so that's a big yielder. So that being said, I'm going to ask Andrea real quick, as someone who prefers ISFP, we are going to ask her about her experience with NE. So, Andrea, would you mind sharing?
Okay, and what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Oh, your experience with, yeah, it's okay. Oh, your experience with NE, Extraverted Intuition.
Oh, with NE?
Yeah, how do you experience NE?
Oh.
And if you do, how do you experience it? And is it a struggle for you? And if you need me to pull up a definition of how it works in you, I can do that as well.
Right. Well, you were saying it's one of the lower on
So
the bottom.
You may not experience it at all. Yeah, that's the ticket. So I want to make sure that we.
So NE is like brainstorming, right? Kind
sort of. Yeah.
Okay.
Dealing with possibilities that are outside of self. So it's not a lot about, it's about abstract concepts that are outside of self.
Okay.
So objective projection of possibilities. So that being said, I will get you a definition real quick. So that way you can share your experience with it as far as it is in the vulnerable slot. So let me give you that real quick. And it says NE is a vulnerable function. This is from Sociotype.com, guys. It says this individual is highly skeptical about ideas and opportunities that appear not to lead anywhere specific and seeks assurance that new innovations will definitely bring material benefits. They prefer the kind of ideas and innovations that offer solutions to existing problems rather than the kind that have uncertain consequences and are likely to bring upheaval and unnecessary change. The individual may tend to forcefully restrict other people's activities in areas where he or she thinks they have no natural talent in. At the same time, he or she is prone to make errors when judging whether or not a person is capable of doing something. The individual generally does not try hard to understand multiple viewpoints, but concentrates on developing only his own. He is not very good at intriguing others with his ideas, even though they have significant merit. The individual dislikes it when people evaluate others' potential to engage in activities or develop skills in which they haven't had experience yet. Above all, he is uncomfortable with such discussions by other people regarding himself. He is inclined to be either over-skeptical of his own potential or going to the other extreme and overestimate his possibilities in specific areas on occasion. Does that ring a bell at all?
No.
So that doesn't.
I don't think I do any of that.
Okay, so that's you've moved past the negative influence of the Extraverted Intuition. All right. So, Stephen, are you clear? Or are you not?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, we had a temporary disconnect. So, does anybody remember the last line that Stephen was at before? It was like the pinnacle of what he was saying before he dropped out.
It was my third point, I think. I think I got through the first two.
Okay. Well, would you mind just repeating the last few things that you said?
Sure, yeah. So I was sort of going over the top three things that led me to switching to an ISFP. The first one was, let's see. Yeah, so it was my SE.
Yep.
First one, well, not in the order that I said it initially, but the first one was that I found that I used SE a lot more than I initially thought. That was a big one. And also NE, I found that for the longest time when I thought I was an INFP, I thought that I just had bad NE. I thought that my NE was just underdeveloped. But then I later on found out that it was an NI-SE loop where I'd be so focused on one thing, it was like I was zoning out. I was in a dream state, which I was sort of confused with NE. And that cleared up over time as well. So yeah, those are some of the biggest ones. And then one last point I'll say is that I found that I was more concerned with things in the here and now than possibilities or hypotheticals. That's another big one. And I think it's really those three big things that changed my mind and led me closer to ISFP than INFP.
Okay. Have you guys looked into Model G at all? Okay, no, from Andrea. Stephen, Model G?
No.
Nope.
You? Okay, so the Model G actually indicates that the ISFP, they renamed the types to FISX, which means they're good with both SI and SE. Okay, so where ISFP struggle is NE, Extraverted Intuition. This is where their challenge tends to be. So Stephen, you said you might have been mixing it up with Extraverted Intuition. Could you explain that a little more?
Right. Sure. Yeah, so I think this is about the part where I got cut off. With INFPs, they're often labeled as being dreamers because they're in a whole other world. And sometimes they'll be in this state where you try to talk to them and things go right through them. And I experienced that as well, where I experienced a strong NISE loop where I will focus on something so much that it's hard for me to change gears, and it's all I think about. So for instance, I was talking about how I like to make music through Ableton Live and FL Studio, and so focused on it, I'll be staying up till 3 a.m. and then for like a week, that's all I'll be thinking about. And I'll be sitting at the dinner table, people will be telling me stuff, and I won't even know what they're saying because I'm in a whole other world. And I think that's a parallel that can be drawn between ISFP and INFP, and how we use NE and NI differently, and how they're also very similar in that regard. And that's what led me to the confusion, because I was in that dream state, but it was a little bit different than what an INFP would experience. And that's what led me to changing my preference. One of the main things that led me to changing my preference.
Okay. Yeah. Have you had a chance to look at Sociotype.com? Andrea didn't agree with the NE vulnerable slot. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that or not. I would like to know if that seems to be inaccurate for you as well. And if that's the case, I will say that the description of NE as a vulnerable function is off on Sociotype.com as far as interviewing both of you. I'm curious to see your guys' perspective. So, Stephen, when you get a short break, I'd love to see what your opinion is of that on Sociotype.com. Just pull up the ISFJ, and that's the ISFP and MBTI, and then look at that vulnerable function for NE and see if that fits you at all. Daniel, Trey, do you have any questions for Andrew or Stephen thus far?
Yeah, I have a question for both of you guys. With my experience with ISFPs, as you guys have kind of briefly mentioned, you are really focused in the here and now, and I guess the different activities that you are valuing, whether it's being in your environment and valuing that and putting less of a value on your foresight and your intuition, perhaps. So I'm wondering how you guys kind of connect with your intuition and the ways that it kind of comes about in your life day to day. Specifically,
I guess I'll answer.
Yeah, sure.
So how I connect with intuition.
Right.
I think for me, intuition has to be like I think when I'm alone and it's quiet, when there's not like 10 other things, you know, competing for my attention, I think that's when my comes in. Um, and also I think when I'm reading, if I'm reading, you know, I generally tend to be alone, and there's not like a lot of distractions going on. I would say that's mostly when my intuition kind of kicks in.
Okay. So it's pretty much when like there's no real kind of pretty much nothing going on in your direct environment. It has to be pretty calm.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So would you say that when you want to think about a really long-term decision, or you're thinking about something for the long term, do you find yourself in places where it is very calm? Do you try to set yourself up to decide for things in places where you can actually think? Or
I mean, I try to.
yeah,
You know, it's kind of hard to. I mean, I have a fairly busy life, but you know, I try to set that kind of time up, you know, where I can just have some time to myself. Maybe not every day, but you know, try to fit that into my life.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Steven, did you have anything to comment on that?
Yeah, I think what I would say sort of stems off what I said before, where I become just so focused on something, it becomes my world pretty much, and it takes away from the here and now a lot. So it's interesting because I said before how part of what led me to becoming an ISFP is I find I'm more in tune with the here and now compared to possibilities, but yet at the same time, the NISE loop that I talked about earlier, it can be a struggle to focus on something if I'm not entirely interested in it. I have to be, that's the key. I have to be interested in it. I'm very selective when it comes to that for me to be focused on something. I'm sort of in this world where I'm focused on something so much. That's where it becomes hard for me to
Oh, man, are you kidding?
and that's what I'm trying to.
I was like, really? Steven, you cut out. Could you repeat that last portion for me?
Yeah, sure. What I was saying was I'm just trying to work on changing gears better. So if I'm so focused on something, I can do other tasks that I'm confronted with, even if I'm not interested in them, because I'm selective in that regard. So yeah, that would be one of the biggest challenges I face.
This is what's fascinating about both of you have mentioned this focus that happens, and this is very indicative of a SE and I. Also with Dr. Dario Nardi's research, he says the same thing. It's they get almost like this, I guess, this tunnel vision when it comes to a particular task, and getting their interest is not necessarily easy. That's why he said their attention span, as far as listening goes, tends to be more focused on what they're interested in. Whereas INFPs generally are interested in whoever's speaking in general, regardless of what it may be. So getting their attention, the INFP is a little bit different than the ISFP. The ISFP is a selective listener, but very good at it when they engage, but they engage at points of interest. Whereas the INFP just listens in full as far as listening goes. So that's what his book, this particularly talks about. I actually moved the book, but it's Neuroscience of Personality, which that's what he was saying in that particular book. And the aspect of SE in that is very fascinating as well. He puts a lot of emphasis on SE in that particular book. And if you haven't seen that definition, I will definitely be more than happy to share that with you guys a little later. So it's pretty awesome description of SE as far as I'm concerned. So Neuroscience of Personality, great read for people who are SE specifically, because he does give a lot of credit to SE. So that being said, you can see the use of both of their intuition. And this is not going to be the case for the INFP, where they're using intuition in the sense of more actively and engaging in the world with it. The ISFP, correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen or Andrea, the ISFP seems to use intuition as more of a private endeavor. And whereas the INFP kind of just throws it out there quite a bit. It's just kind of sporadically engaging with the environment with it. It seems for both of you that it's more of a everyone shut up and let me remove myself from the environment, and more of a private endeavor. Would you say that's a fair assumption? Maybe not the shut up part, because you guys may be nicer than me, but but what would you say, Stephen?
I would agree with it. Yeah. I think, like I said before, it's a big challenge doing something I'm not interested in. I sort of have to force myself to become interested in something, and I know that sounds wrong, but that's ultimately what it feels like I have to do, because it's very easy for me to be engaged in something when I feel like it's something I can gain from, or if I have other interests tied to it. But yeah, I definitely agree with what you said. If I'm listening to a conversation of a topic that I have no interest in, then it's difficult and things like that. So I agree.
Right. Do you guys find yourself being auxiliary SE users? Do you ever find yourself getting a little antsy or restless?
I guess it depends on the situation.
Okay. What about you, Steven?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really have a good answer for that. I think it really depends as well.
Okay. I'm just curious. Like I said, I'm probing you guys right now, so I want to see. One of the things that I want to make sure we understand too is that the ISFP is, at least with the Socionics description of SE, is going to be a little more assertive than the INFP, as far as standing up for their own values, pushing forward a little harder. This is the typical definition from Socionics. A little more assertive with SE, the use of force. Have you found that to be the case, Stephen or Andrea? Use of force in your life at all?
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have to enjoy it per se, but it just comes out when it comes out.
Yeah. What I would say to that, Damon, is NI and FI are really combined, because if there's a value clash, for example, I don't have a problem with people in power. I have no issues if someone thinks they're above me or anything like that. I never really strived to be on top of the power hierarchy or anything like that. But if someone's demeaning to me or demeaning to other people around me, myself to be more assertive. So if there's a value clash, then definitely I think I can exhibit that more often.
Okay. Andrea?
I guess so. I mean, I don't really consider myself very assertive. But I think in terms of values, like once I reach this, I guess, of what my values are, like I pretty much stick with them and I don't change them. I tend to more like walk away from something if something is like against my values. Like I'm more likely to just cut it out, like cut it off or cut myself off from it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Right. So ISFPs are typically classified as assertive individuals, but as far as the assertion of use of force, they tend to be more comfortable applying force. That's the key. Whereas INFPs are very uncomfortable with force, typically because that is their break function or their vulnerable function, which is SE, right in that seventh slot. So that's where the difference is, and that's what I'm just trying to highlight here. So
Okay.
I don't know if that resonates at all in the regard of your particular lifestyle. Like I said, they're not really described as forceful people, but Stephen said, he is willing to use force if necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not uncomfortable with it at that point. Doesn't mean he enjoys it.
Right.
I'm just kidding. All right, so Trey, any questions for Stephen or Andrea here?
Actually, right now I'm just absorbing everything. So no.
Okay, so that is an example of NISE right there. He's taking it all in. All right, Daniel, you want to shoot?
Yeah, sure. Actually, hold on. I have with me something that's very cool. I have a script for actually for ISFPs. I think it's right here. Yep. So when it comes to kind of, I guess, your personal needs, right? I specifically focus on more of like the interpersonal, relationships, social dynamics of types. And so I'm working on a series right now. We're actually going to type dynamics with dating and relationships. Can you guys, if you're comfortable, shed a little light on, maybe what your needs are generally in a relationship or in the dating life or interpersonally? What do you guys need, time to yourself or from others? Can you guys enlighten us on that aspect of your life? Either one of you is totally okay to just open it.
Yeah, interrupted the rest of us. It's totally fine. Go ahead. Execute.
Should I?
Yeah,
I guess
go
I
ahead.
could. I guess I'll answer. So you're asking, what I focus on, like what I need out of a relationship? Is that what the
Yeah.
question is?
Yeah, like we want to explore like that dynamic.
Okay. I guess what I feel is most important for me in a relationship is somebody who shares my values. I think that would be the main thing. I
Okay.
think that's pretty important for me. Because I think that, that I think is what's most important in like getting along with somebody. Because if you're like completely different, if you have a completely different worldview or value system, it's gonna cause friction. For me, I guess that would be the most important thing.
So it's really a sense of compatibility and harmony for you, right?
Mhm.
Making sure those values are being matched up, or being able to appreciate them, right, where they don't conflict with your own. Like, I'm pretty sure you'd be able to accept somebody's values for as long as you can see somehow that they may connect to yours. So as long as there's kind of like, I guess, that balance. But cool, that was a really great answer. Steven, do you have any thoughts on this area?
Yeah, I would second what she said, and also I would throw in respect. I think being respected in a relationship is really important, where there's mutual respect, where you can understand each other at a deeper level, and it's not superficial. And regardless of some of the trials you may face, you can continue to feel that way about them, because friction will eventually come along, as I've experienced before. So that's what I would add. Respect.
Okay, cool. All good points.
All right. So, Trey, you still absorbing? You got something? Because you know me, I'll take off.
Not anything necessarily interesting. Like I said, I haven't really gotten to like really observe ISFPs in real life, so it's never really been.
Okay. All right. So that being said, let's talk about inferior TE. Have you guys noticed this in your personality? Regardless if you're INFP or ISFP, you may notice how this function manifests in your personality. Let's start with Andrea's perception on this, TE in the inferior slot. How do you experience this? What does this feel like to you, and what is your relationship with it? That was a lot of
Okay.
questions.
Yeah, that was so much.
Inferior TE is like I'm like, could you bring me up to speed on that?
Okay. Let's let Steven go, and then I'll fire back at the TE. So I'll let Steven launch that off first, and then I
Okay.
will give you a little more about TE, then we'll go with you. Does that sound good? All right,
Yeah.
perfect. Steven.
Yep.
So one of the biggest trials I faced in terms of my TE was when I used to do speech and debate back in high school. I found that when I first started doing speech and debate, my TE was not very good. But it's something that I developed over time, and I definitely have more appreciation for. I think it's one of those things where I don't really recognize when I use it. I don't consciously know when I'm using it. It's just something that I've been fine-tuned to use, if that makes any sense. I feel like I don't value it nearly as much as I do the other functions, that's for sure, but that I do try to hone whenever I can. But I've had lots of experience using it in the past, so not much to say about it, but yeah, I think that's what.
Okay. So let's really define. Let's give a scope real quick. Blake and I, we live TE. Obviously, that's our dominant approach to life. It's having logical consistency in not only presentation, but structuring and ordering as far as finding sequential steps. So think of it as an empirical way of putting steps together. Step 1, step 2, step 3, ability to present information, ability to detect logical consistency outside of self. It can even sacrifice internal logical consistency to look for usefulness and resourcefulness in tools. How is this being judged according to its use? It's not so much, what model does this fit? Does it fit a framework? Does it not? Which is more of introverted thinking, but more of how is this thing meeting criteria? How is it meeting standard rules, procedures, that type of thing? And even the creation of rules and procedures is looking to standardize. So if that helps, if you have anything to share. If not, we can move on. But I'm just curious about your perspective.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot more sense. I think for me, TE, like having, like I guess, is that kind of like what it is like having like practicality and
yeah,
is that kind of what it is? Okay.
Yeah, pragmatism can be associated with TE. More so with ESTJ than ENTJ, but yeah, pragmatism is part of it.
I think for me, that's something that I really admire, and like, it's not a strength of mine, but I admire it in other people. And for me, it's not a natural thing, but I do tend to, I guess, try to attain it, I guess would be a way to put it. So, yeah.
Okay. Blake, I'm going to switch it to you real quick. Let's just talk about TE real quick, just how you experience TE. And then, if that fuels anything for Stephen or Andrea, I'd like to go into that aspect as well. So, Blake, if you wouldn't mind sharing real quick.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about TE. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, you're loud and clear.
Terrific. Man, TE, it's just like you are, I don't want to give the basic definition of it. Or do I?
No, just your own experience with it. How does it act in your life? And then let's see if Stephen or Andrea have any type of comparison in the sense of finding a standard to compare that to. And that alone will demonstrate TE, of course. But then again, we can use that as an example. Might recall something in their life that they're like, oh yeah, I can see how I've used that before. So I want to see if you have a similar experience.
Well, whenever I see, from watching other people try to solve solutions, when I recognize that they're trying to solve it without using TE, frustrates me, and it kind of gets me into this mode like, whoa, dude, you're not in any sort of logical thinking right now. You're never going to solve this problem. I know exactly how you need to solve this, and it involves, stop looking at the situation objectively, disattaching yourself, from being spontaneous with your emotions, and planning what you're going to do next.
Right. So the audience, this is a side point, Blake, but the audience is wondering, where's the suit, Blake? You're like failing standard. Your TE has failed you, and your SI has failed.
Dude, I'll tell you what. I was running in a suit like 10 minutes ago. I was late. Okay.
All right.
I had to strip it off because it was getting hot.
Okay. So that being said, Stephen, Andrea, parallels at all with TE? Anything that you noticed? Now it's inferior, so I don't really expect a lot per se for TE, but I just want to see if you guys have any examples how. how it comes in. Anything spark from Blake, what Blake said?
Continue, that's fine.
I've got nothing to follow up with it. That would
Okay.
be
No worries. All right.
worthwhile. So
yeah. All right. So I'm tapping in that inferior function. So it's a hard space. That's why it's like I'm diving in a little deeper to see if I can get anything out of that space, but it's all right. So we will move from TE. Let's talk about FI. Let's talk about how that, now this is where I'm going to get a little awkward. So let's talk about FI and what role it plays and how that actually demonstrates. We'll start with Stephen first, and we'll move from there. Stephen, how does FI play a role in your life? Where do you notice it most? Obviously, it's in your own internal world. How does it operate with someone who leads with it?
yeah, so the metaphor I like to use with FIs, I like to call it a lens because it's really how I live my life. And a lot of the decisions that I make, the vast majority of them, are through that lens. And so, yeah, it's a huge part of my life. I can give you an example of how I think in terms of my FI. So one example would be, and this would also sort of tie into FE. So when I use FE, it's with a lot of my close friends. And then I'll also use FE with people that I know that are in need, that are suffering from poverty. So this is where my FI comes in. I have a problem with people that ask for a lot, that are in a situation where they're poor or are struggling when they got into that situation from willful ignorance. If that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. So in that situation, I wouldn't be as understanding if it's through willful ignorance. And another example would be, I talked about this earlier as well. I don't like it when people use others for personal gain. So, and this is really a broad brush, but if I see that people are using each other, and I happen to be friends or connected to that person in some regard, then I'll cut off all friendship. And my respect for them will change a lot. So those are just a few examples of how my FI works. And sometimes I sound like an asshole when I say it, but that's just how I am. And I try not to let like politics and religion really affect my relationships. I try to tone that down a bit, but it is also a major part of my life. I have pretty strong political opinions. I don't discuss that with my friends. There's a certain environment where I will do that, but I know pretty well beforehand that that can affect relationships, so I try not to bring that into it. But yeah, FI is a huge part of my life. Like I said, it's a lens that I make a lot of my decisions off of, and it also affects people that are in my inner circle. This also is the same for INFPs. They talk about how there's a wall between them and the person that may have a potential friendship. So there's a pretty strict route to becoming a friend with me, because this is where the values come in, right? And there's like a big testing period where I try to understand them better. And that lens of FI is really more apparent in that situation, because I'm trying to understand these people more, and decide whether or not they would make a good friend, or if the compatibility is right. And it's the same for relationships as well. So I know I'm kind of talking too much, but yeah, like I said, it's a big part of my life, and pretty much every major decision I make is filtered through that lens.
Okay. So Stephen, one point is you're not talking too much. It's always me that's talking too much. So you're the guest. You can talk as much as you want. That's fine. Don't ever feel like you're talking too much. That's me trying to limit myself.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's my job, is not to talk too much. Andrea, anything about FI?
Yeah, definitely. I see FI as kind of like my inner values, I guess. It's very internal for me, and kind of like what Stephen was saying, how it's not like openly shared with a whole lot of people. Like I tend to be very selective with how I share like my religious views or my political views. But it's very strong, and it is very much a part of who I am. And I do tend to get along, with pretty much anybody, as long as, they're, acting decently and not, a terrible person or anything. But yeah, I kind of see it as like just like my inner framework of values and, you know, what's important to me, you know, like my family and, you know, my home and, you know, just things that are kind of like a part of my world, I guess. It's kind of how I see it. So definitely like just it's just like a driving part of who I am, really.
Well, that's really cool. It's like both of you seem so like, yes, I know who I am and what I am. So Stephen, I have a question for you. If someone disagrees with your political standpoint, what happens?
Yeah, so like I said, I try not to discuss it that much, but it can get pretty fierce, Damon.
Is that the SE? I'm
I-
talking about the assertion, that force that I wanted to talk about earlier?
Exactly. That's another example of that. It can get pretty fierce. The thing with debate when it comes to political discussion is that nobody's opinion changes afterwards. Sometimes it all seems worth it, like it's not even worth it. But I still engage in it anyway because my opinions are so strong. But yeah, it can get pretty fierce. That's for sure.
Okay, so fierce. Yeah, that's what I was looking for a little earlier when I was talking about that use of SE, that assert. Andrea, I see you laughing. Is that true for you? Do you have that fierce side to you?
I mean, yeah, I do. I feel like I have to hold my tongue a lot though, because like I don't want to, you know, ruin a relationship or anything. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of times where I'm just like, I could say so much right now, but I'm not going to.
Holding a tongue, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I think that's what Stephen was saying too. He learns not to go to that direction because it tends to put relationships in jeopardy. See, me, it works a little bit different with me. It's like, if you're wrong, I'm going to say you're wrong. If you hate me, after the fact, I'm like, hey, it's okay if you're wrong. We're humans. It's fine if you're wrong. You can be wrong once in a while. It's no big deal. I don't ever see it as jeopardizing a relationship. Other people may take it that way, but I see it as you're uninformed and you need to be informed.
There is a point though. I mean, there's a point where like if somebody like completely disagrees with me on something that I find extremely important, it's like stand for what I believe in no matter what. And if you don't like me for that, like then that's on you. So like I do get to a point where I feel that way.
Okay. All right.
I
So
have a question.
I have a question too.
Hang on, guys. I'm going to get this question out from the audience real quick, and then we'll do that. Jack asked, he goes, how long does it take to get to know someone new, and what sets you off about a person? So whoever wants to go first, Andrew or Stephen. I think that's a really, really good question.
It really depends for me. It depends on if I vibe with somebody. I mean, there are some people where I've tried to, you know, I've had like conversations with them and like for some reason it just does not jive very well and like that kind of hinders like getting to know somebody. And then there are some people where it's just like almost instantaneous. It just kind of depends for me. But usually it takes a while. I mean, it takes a while for me to open up and, you know, get to know somebody.
And then Stephen?
Right. So from my perspective, when it comes to me opening up, it does take a very long time. And I also find with other people that I'm trying to become friends with, it takes a long time as well. Sometimes it can take months. Like, for example, I actually lost a friend very recently. We were friends for about 3 months, and we started having some conflict later on in our friendship. Some things came up that I had no idea about when we first knew each other. So we're not just guilty of it. A lot of people are guilty of harboring stuff that they will keep, and eventually it will spill out later in a friendship or a relationship. So I think it can take a long time. It really depends, but if I had to put a certain length of time to know someone, I would say 2 months at least, sometimes more. I don't think it's something that you can just do in a week or 2 week period. It's something that takes a long period of time. And I think the second part of that question was what are some turnoffs or?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So the biggest turnoff for me would just be superficiality, because that's one of my main values, is being genuine to yourself. So when I find out that someone is putting on like a facade, or they're trying to impress other people and it's not really them, then yeah, I have a big problem with that. I want to have friendships with people that are genuine and they're actually showing their true selves, flaws or not. So yeah, superficiality is probably the biggest one, and that's a major value clash of mine.
Okay. Andrew, do you want to add anything to that, or anything at all?
Yeah,
Is this
what he
superficial?
said.
Real quick, what I just did, put on a dress shirt from my closet, so I can look better in front of you guys. Is it superficial?
No, it's genuine. That's really who you are, Blake, the suit wearing guy. See, I don't think that bothers
Okay.
you, all right?
Thank you.
All right, Andrew, you want to go?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna agree with the superficiality thing.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to let Trey ask the next question since he hasn't had an opportunity yet to ask. So Trey, go ahead.
I think I had multiple opportunities, just no questions. So one of the things I'd like to ask you guys about is SE. And when I say that, I'm thinking about how each type uses their auxiliary as a tool for their dominant function. So for example, using myself as an example, with INFJs and INTJs, before they handle anything or any situation, they have a number of different ways that they think it will pan out. They'll say, well, this may happen, this may happen, this may happen, that may happen. And they use their auxiliary function, TE or FE, to see which one's right. So they'll actually make an action or make something happen in order to see whether or not they were correct in their predictions. That's what they primarily care for, is their understanding of what's happening next. But they use the actions of FE or TE to supply that understanding. So what I want to hear you guys explain is how you think that SE uses. How do you think you use SE as a way to supply the motive of your dominant function?
Steven?
It's a really good question. I'm still trying to process it a little bit.
Oh, okay. I thought we lost you. I was like,
No, I'm here.
we are starting to lose you, actually.
So, yeah, no, I was like, I asked the question and I was like,
Yeah.
oh crap, that was a big question.
Let's give Steven an opportunity to his internet to buffer real quick. Let's ask Andrew, and then we'll bounce right back to Steven.
Yeah.
Okay, so how I use SE to kind of express my dominant, is that kind of what it was?
Yeah, so for example, just going back to the INTJ example, they may see a list of different things they think will happen, different ways that things will pan out, which is NI. They're saying, okay, here's the different futures I can see happening, and then they'll engage with TE so that they can see which one actually happens. With ENTJs, they have a dominant extroverted thinking agenda. I want to get this done. When they have difficulty, they say, okay, let's step back. What's the best way to approach this situation? You know what I mean? So just like it's the auxiliary is always used as a tool for the dominant.
Okay. I see it more as like a spontaneous thing, maybe. Like I use SE to kind of express myself, I guess, would be a way to put it. I like to sing. I like to play the piano. You know, creating artistic things. You know, it's kind of more of a spontaneous thing. Like I feel like, you know, singing, or I feel like, you know, doing something creative, I guess, to kind of like give a form to like feeling.
Yeah, is it like you find some kind of tool for expression and you come into it and it's almost like you become it, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see it in my head, and I can kind of just see you coming into it and just be like, it just happens naturally, like as if you don't have to do it.
Yeah, that's true. I often feel like when I sing, I feel like very myself. Um, and that feels get that feeling a lot like when I'm singing, I kind of just lose myself in that and it for myself. And it just feels very right.
So do you think that singing and stuff like that ever helps you understand yourself just like more, or do you
Oh
think
yeah,
you just feel in the right place?
definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that
Let's
Oh.
let Steven go real quick if he's back. Steven, you're good? That frozen?
I think so. My internet's a little bit choppy, but I'll try.
Okay, so Steven, you can shut your camera off real quick, and you'll probably have a clearer connection. I can do that for you. No worries.
I love to sing, by the way. I was singing on the way over here.
What part? Oh, Steven, you're on a mobile device. I actually can't control it from the mobile. So you can turn your camera off temporarily and you can speak. You shouldn't have an issue.
Okay.
All right, so go ahead.
All right. So can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. So yeah, I would add a lot of what she said resonated with me a lot. And I would add a little bit to it. What I would say is I also like to play the keyboard. And I use musical instruments as a way to channel certain emotions that I might feel. And I know that emotions and MBTI aren't directly tied together. I think that's a big misnomer. But I think there is a pretty strong connection to MBTI in terms of an ISFP and an INFP and a few other types as well, where I will use musical instruments as a way to channel emotion that I have, and I also get inspiration from a lot of things that are brought in through my SE. So yeah, this is a difficult question. I wish I could give you a better answer, but I don't really know how to articulate it. I think Andrea did a pretty good job.
I have a question that I think may help you with that.
Okay, go ahead.
So she herself had said that through different modes of expression, she can kind of understand herself better, or maybe even just feel as if she's herself, like a close feeling of being herself. So my question, I guess, is like, what is that like? Like, what exactly are you thinking of something? You know what I mean? Like, is there something that comes to mind? Is there something that, and I'm asking both of you because I'm sure both of you experience this. So, is there something specific that comes to mind, or is it just a feeling, or like how exactly what is it like to be an ISFP in that situation?
Yeah, so one of the big questions I get asked a lot ever since I started associating myself with the ISFP type was, how do you use SE? And I had a discussion on our Slack page with a guy named Calix. I'm sure you guys all know him. And we went pretty in depth in that. And I've had a few months, because this conversation was a while ago, and I've had a few months to process it. And it's still very difficult for me to explain how SE plays a role in my life. But I think part of what makes it difficult is it's like when I explain it, it sounds almost like it's mutually exclusive, right? So it's like I'm bringing up all these senses that I have, and all these other people don't have the senses. But I think the biggest thing is just the senses that I experience are more powerful. They're more like I resonate with them more than a typical person. And I've often researched the connection between MBTI and the I believe it's called sensitive person, something like that. You guys, I don't know if you guys are
We're talking
familiar
about
with
HSP?
it. HSP, yes, HSP. I did some research about that a while ago, and I also found that I was connecting to that a lot, where everything just feels a lot more intense. And when I experience senses, it's also like that as well, where if I'm listening to music, I find myself getting lost in the music a lot. And it sounds very cliche, but it's true. I'm walking late at night, I just feel more in tune with everything. And a lot of the times, what I was trying to explain earlier is that I'll use music as a way to let my emotions out, sort of like a therapeutic instrument, a therapeutic device. And so that's one of the major ways I use it. But yeah, it's very difficult for me to explain SE and how it connects to the other functions like Trey was asking. But yeah, the biggest thing for me is just it feels more intense. And one thing I will add is, and I was talking to Calix about this earlier, and you guys might think it's funny, but like if I go see a movie, for example, and then after I'm done watching the movie and I'm in another environment, I still feel like I'm in that movie, right? If I still feels like I'm in that environment, it's that strong. Or if I'm watching a show on TV and then I go outside and walk, I still feel like I'm there, because when I'm entrenched in this mode and I'm experiencing something and it's resonating with me, it still feels like, it's not like I'm completely there, but it still feels like I'm in that environment, if that makes any sense, and everything around me is affected by that. So and I think it also connects with my SI in a way, because I'll remember things based on those experiences that I have, because they're so intense. But yeah, it's very difficult for me to explain it. Hopefully I cleared a little bit up for you guys. And I don't know if Andrea can relate at all to what I said, because it's kind of random, but yeah.
Andrea?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I agree with that, what Steven said. The idea of resonance, I guess, he mentioned, and like if I'm out on a walk and like the sky is just a certain color or shade, you know, I do sense it very intensely, and then all of a sudden, like, I just get this feeling like all is right with the world, like because of this beautiful color that I'm seeing, or just, you know, like a piece of music that I find particularly beautiful. It's just like I'll listen to it and it's just like all is right with the world right now. Like it's just a very intense, deep feeling. So I would agree with that completely.
All right, well, thank you guys for answering that question.
All right, so Daniel, you had a question.
I forgot my question, but what I will go into is shoot, I don't even know. I'm like lost. Jay's question was really good. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so audience, I want to ask you guys if you have any questions for our SFPs here. I saw a bunch of them earlier, but there was so many I couldn't get to them all. So if you guys repost a few questions, I will be happy to ask our audience and our guests here as well. So feel free to post that. In the meantime, Blake, do you have anything for them? Because, you know, Blake, actually, your perspective would be really interesting on this, because you are SI as an auxiliary slot. And so, yeah, so they have SE as their auxiliary slot. Have you had any experience with ISFPs? And if you have, what was that like? Or people that you might have assumed to be ISFPs? Because I actually think, you know, the statistics are they're like, I think like 7, 8%, 6%, something like that of the population. But I actually think they're like -%, because I don't ever see them. And I've typed very few ISFPs.
You'll find them in choir, in choir class. I took it for 3 years, and I'm pretty sure I met with a bunch of ISFPs in that class. Usually, like in the musical areas, you know.
MBTV official statistics for ISFP, -7%
Yeah,
of the population.
it's like
You know, it's
people owe ISFPs. Like, I want to be ISFP. See, that's the -7%. There's more wannabe ISFPs than actual ISFPs. That's my experience thus far. So, Blake, go ahead.
Can I give you some statement? Okay, so I knew this guy. He prefers ISFP. He did football with me in 8th grade, and he sucked at it. I mean, I sucked at it too. But he eventually, like, he joined choir and he found his rhythm, and he ended up being like, and
We got none of that. He ended up being blank and blank, as far as I
what
heard.
the heck did I mess something up? I'm sorry.
Yeah, something cut out.
A really good singer in choir.
Okay,
He's
so
like
he was a really good singer.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we have kind of a music commonality here. A lot of INFPs I know are very into music as well. So
and like I talked to him. He felt really insubordinate for not being able to excel in football because it's like what all the other guys were doing. You know?
Okay. Yeah. All right. So quick question from our audience. Jack has a question. He said, is there someone you rely on as a provider of reliable factual information? And how confident are you with a load of factual information yourself? So we'll start with Andrea.
Okay.
So 2 questions. I'll re-ask if you need me to.
Okay. So I don't know if there's one source that I get factual information from. I try to, fact check as much as I can. I don't know. It's kind of a question that I still ask myself sometimes. It's like, just trying to get to the bottom of, if I see something like on the news or something on Facebook, it's like I don't really want to just like accept it right away. I try to sources and try to figure it out from there. If there's like one like specific source that I rely on.
Okay. Stephen?
I like facts. Facts are good. What I like about facts, especially statistics, is that if you're in a debate with someone, if you're in a debate with someone, right, and it's pretty even, and you throw a statistic out there, and it's a legit statistic, boom, right there. I mean, that's all it takes. Just having a statistic on your side can completely change the course of a debate. And I think statistics are just so powerful. And yeah, I definitely have an appreciation for facts. I think in today's world, we have to be very careful where we're getting these facts. And I'm using air quotations right now because I think a lot of things are presented as facts that aren't really that legitimate. But if it is a legitimate source, and you know the facts are for real, then yeah, I definitely have a big appreciation for them.
I have a question.
Not just in debate, but also just regular discourse.
Daniel?
Yeah, go ahead.
So going off of like statistics and like, very factual or scientific based, let's just say you had a view, right, where, it was a personal belief you had. Let's just say, like, there's something that comes to mind. I actually just watched a video of somebody, I think she's a comedian, and she's on a talk show who she was saying how children who are born with single mothers, right, are actually more likely to commit crime and all these different things. So she was saying that, pretty much don't raise a kid as a single mom. So my question here for you guys is, let's just say you have a belief that, something along the lines of, being a single mother or, raising a child as a single parent, belief or something that goes along those lines. If you have a fact where it's like it contradicts like a belief you may have, how does that resonate with you? Are you more inclined to change it? Are you going to be more reactive? Because in this situation on the TV show and the video, people are really mad because the lady was saying pretty much, just, make sure that this guy has a parent, a father role in their life or two head kind of adults, leading this child's development so they avoid, criminal behavior. So I don't know if you have an example of what I'm trying to say versus, the example I gave, but pretty much.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what you're saying is if I have a certain opinion on something and I see a fact that contradicts that opinion, will I change my mind about it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, yeah, I would say yes to that question, definitely. I have a lot of appreciation for facts, and if I have a certain opinion on something and a fact will contradict it, then I will change my, well, not always, I think there are some caveats to that, but most of the time I will change my opinion.
Yeah.
So yeah, very simple answer. Hopefully it's good enough.
Yeah, that's good.
I have a question to kind of like piggyback off that. How long does it take you to make the decision to change your opinion on it? Is it like immediate, or does it have to seep in, and then while you're laying down at night, you have it exist? Oh my gosh, I was wrong. He was right. I need to change now. Like,
It
how's that work?
depends on how long I've held that position for. If it's something that I was recently discovering, then I would be fairly quick. But if it's like I think religion is a good example. Some people can subscribe to a certain religion for years of time, and they'll come across some facts. They do their own research. That can take a while for them to change their opinion, for sure, because it's a part of their life. But yeah, if it's something that I just recently discovered and I see a fact that contradicts it, I'll be like, yeah, okay, I guess I was wrong, and whatever, I'll change. It's not that easy. I mean, I make it sound easy. It's something that I'm really interested in, or that I thought I was right about. But yeah, it's a fairly quick process.
Because this could be a hard place for for FI dominant or TE dominant individuals.
Exactly.
Depending on how you bring this in. Me personally, somebody, I think Brian Ascani in the messages right now, he was kind of talking about how FE kind of plays a role in this. Where for me, I'm very flexible. Where it's like I may find that I believe something for a very long time, but it may change based on just between facts and personal opinion, and personal experiences that I find people going through. And so, like, let's just say, for example, I had a belief, and then like the example that I had about, let's just say that I believed that, being raised a single mother with a single mom was like the best in the world. But then I realized that with like very factual information, that's not the case. I would change that view, because my perspective is to just have like a continuously building framework for what is right or how to engage with people, versus internalizing that and really caring about it more so for me, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I think when you brought up values, if there's a value conflict, then it will definitely take longer for me to change my opinion. If it's something I don't really have any values attached to and it's fairly recent, then yeah, it's a quick process.
Oh, cool.
So I appreciate what you threw in there, because
Nice.
values are a big part of it.
Yeah, and it's like I have values too, but like at the end of the day, it's like it's for harmony. Like my personal values could change, as long as there's certain parameters for it to change, right? Somebody who knows more than me in that area, or a different life experience, a different dimension that I haven't seen, yet with that value, right? So like a good example is, Damon likes to bring up this one great example of, everybody knows that Hitler is a bad person, but valuing kind of Hitler's intellectualism or different things that he's done, it's okay to admire certain qualities as long as you don't agree with the overall experience that person inflicted, right? And so there are things that I may, model or value, but they necessarily don't fit into a bigger picture, right? It's not really permanent. And so I've met a lot of FI dominants who have, I guess, very cemented values. And I wonder if it's because there's a lack of data, or it's just because it's very ingrained from early childhood, or, there just isn't, like, I guess, opinionated sufficient amount of information to change their mind or to see things differently. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
All right, so I don't know if that was a direct question. So that could.
It was just a generic question.
That can lead into a whole nother discussion. I think I'm gonna start wrapping this up with one last question for both of our ISFPs here, and this question is: are there any types that you've noticed trending that you don't really have you disconnect with naturally? at least assumed types? You don't have to be definite on that, but let's say that you naturally clash with a certain type, or is that just in general too vague for you guys? Stephen, I know that you have had a lot of experience working and understanding other people's type. I don't know about Andrea's perspective, so we'll start with you, then we'll switch over to her.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay.
I would say, and Trey, is Trey still on this call?
Yeah, he is. He just doesn't seem to
Okay.
be because he fades out.
Okay, yeah. Before Trey changed his preference to INFJ, he used to mention FE and how he didn't like FE because he thought it was shallow. And I would also agree with that a little bit. I think underdeveloped FE exhibited through someone can be a huge clash for me. I don't appreciate, like I said, this goes like along with what I was saying before. I don't appreciate superficiality at all. And so if someone's just trying to appeal to people to compensate for their inner insecurity, then yeah, that's a major problem for me. So I don't think I can pinpoint a certain type, Damon, that I clash with. Just in terms of a very broad perspective, FE, especially underdeveloped FE, can be a big problem for me.
Yeah, I actually want to touch on that since you brought it up. With the whole FE thing, one of the main problems I have, and I even have it with myself because I do this as well, is I don't like how FE kind of expects others to fill in a role or fill in some kind of action. It's almost like FE users will sometimes wait for the other person to make an action, and if they don't make the action that they thought they should make, then it's not good, which I don't really like, and I do it myself. And I don't really like it because I also use FI quite a bit. Being an INFJ, they use FI quite a bit in their personality as well. So according to Model G, but like I was saying, I have that issue with FE. I don't necessarily see it as superficial and stuff. I think that FE really does attempt to express themselves and may have a hard time doing it. And now that I recognize that I use FE, one of the things I've always understood is that a lot of times with a lot of conflicts, people just don't explain themselves well enough. Like when I watch movies, I'm like, why are you just standing there? Like you should be explaining exactly what happened, why you were compelled to do what you did and everything. Like why aren't you saying this and why aren't you saying that? And that's something I have an issue with because for me, the best way I see to handle the situation would be to express myself in every aspect of the issue or conflict that I had so that, the other person can understand where I'm coming from and can understand why everything happened the way it did. So that may be my NI talking a little bit too. But I just wanted to touch on that since you brought it up because I've never talked about it since then.
So I'm going to ask Andrew the same question, but before I do, I want to comment on that thing real quick, which is FE and TE, one shuts off the other. So Trey is like, why are all these TE users not explaining themselves? That's where his frustration comes from. He goes, why don't they just explain himself? And it's like, because we want the shortest, fastest, most efficient answer. I don't want to waste time explaining something that you should already have known in the first place. Like, why do I have to explain how I feel? Just get it and move on. And so that's kind of the aspect of that. But Andrea, please, your perspective.
Yeah, I think with the FE, FI, I wonder maybe if it causes like a little bit of friction with FI people is like it's kind of the same function, but like the opposite movement, so to speak, I guess. Like, I don't know, that's just a thought that kind of came to me. It's like we're kind of like the same, but like it's a completely different direction that they're going. Like one's extroverted and one's introverted. And I think for me, like if FE is kind of immature, it feels a little invasive, I guess. And like I've had people tell me maybe they're FE people, but they're like, you should explain yourself. Like, don't let this just hang. Like, go the extra mile and like give all these reasons and explain yourself to this other person. And I'm like, well, I already told them what I what I thought, like that's enough for me. And you know, if they want to think something bad about me, then that's on them. But like Effie kind of like wants to like push into that space and like, but no, you have to like let them know like everything and like give all these reasons. So maybe that's why it has like kind of like that like icky feeling, like don't intrude on my space here. I think that might be it.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely it, because I mean, Trey he intrudes on my space quite a bit, and he's always asking, well, why? Why not? I'm just like, that's the way it is.
Well,
that's the way. So, what, Daniel?
I want to interject here because I'm the Neffe dominant guy, so it's like, you know, gotta chime in here. I believe that when Effie is unhealthy with somebody who's using Effie, it could totally look like that. It could look intrusive and I guess almost domineering in the sense of expectation and appropriateness. But for me, I'm always looking for like that outer harmony. When I see somebody who's uncomfortable, I'm not going to probe. You know, the probing is like another way of kind of talking back and forth. It's kind of communication. When the way that I see it, I never probe. I'm always just kind of curious, and I'm more interested than I am probing. So I think if you're not talking to somebody who is maybe not FE dominant, like an ENFJ or ESFJ, they may be less intrusive when they are in a healthy place. But I actually have seen a lot of the times when ESFJs, and this is just from my experience because I don't know too many ENFJs, a lot of ESFJs can be very intrusive or almost demanding. Whereas for me, there's like kind of like, I guess if I'm looking for comfort or a harmony or to feel comfortable with somebody, I want to kind of hear what the person has to say or feel. And so a good example would be, I would never be intrusive, but I would say something like, hey, like I feel kind of uncomfortable right now. Like, how do you feel about us being friends, right? Like, how do you feel, right? So there's really like a legitimate, authentic reason to desire information from the other person. But in an unhealthy place, I can totally see someone being like, you know, why are you being like this? And I need this, this, and this from you. And that's not good enough. Or your answer isn't good enough, right? Whereas it's way more simple when it comes to, in my experience, especially with FI dominance, when, you know, an INFP or an ISFP says something on their mind, you know, even if it's like one word or a couple words, like I'll be able to understand that. I'll be able to like kind of step back and receive that answer. Whereas somebody who is in an unhealthy place may just always want more. And so, you know, you have to look at that contrast, I guess. So I just want to like shed the light there, you know?
Okay, so the point was, we're not looking down on FE. That's not that was not the aim of the conversation.
Yeah.
It was just the perspective of looking at how the INFP is perceiving FE. Also, though, I do want to say this, that it's very, very common for people to assume FE is something that it's not. For example, as a joke, we've been putting hearts and flowers in the comments, but that's really not what FE is about. And so this conversation is not about FE. There's other videos about that. So this conversation is ultimately, was the topic of this particular one was to just express the things that they may feel they struggle with other types. And what we're looking at is a very common core of superficiality.
Yeah.
And that's where they have issues with it. But I think pretty much anybody has issues with superficiality if we really think about it. I don't think anybody's like, oh, I love superficial people. Invite them into my life. Bring them in, right? No, that doesn't happen. There's not that aspect. I think, but what I think Stephen and Andrew are trying to get at is it is like a detrimental cross of values when somebody is presenting a facade, whereas other people are like, wow, that person's superficial, but you know, I don't really mind so much. It is what it is. And would that be fair to say, Stephen?
Definitely.
Okay, so yeah, that's what it is. And you know, I don't want to look at like FE users and like they accept superficiality into their lives. They don't. We just have to remember FE is an expression, and it's a core expression of their own internal attitude, and they feel it's more comfortable while it's being maneuvered with people objectively, so outside of themselves. So it is an expression of who they really are. It doesn't mean FE is superficial. It means that that's who they are. And though it doesn't look like something that, because we have this problem with looking at things from our own perspective and it doesn't match, then it's fake. I'm guilty of this just as much as the next person. I'm like, well, I wouldn't do that, so something's wrong here. And that's a meta program I put up a long time ago, and I'm actually filtering through it now. But the point is to understand that, ultimately FE is not this negative function. And if we can understand how it works, I use role FE. And so for me, it's a very powerful tool, and it's important looking at appropriateness and looking at how it affects people. But I do it for TE reasons, of course. It's not like it's really FE in its fullest regard. I can't represent FE very well or effectively, but I see its value and I see its importance, but it's not a superficial function. So I want our audience to know that as well. It's just the question was aimed to see what kind of issues they have, and primarily it's not even FE, it's superficiality. So Daniel and Trey obviously use FE, and that's, they aren't superficial people. I've had a lot of time with them, and I would say that. So it's not FE itself, it's the subject. And remember that. Don't judge people by type, judge on who they are. So if you're going to judge people, judge on who they are, not so much this is my type. And that's not what Stephen and Andrew were saying, though, but I want to make that very clear. All right, any last things? Daniel, Trey, Blake, for our guest here?
Nope. I really like this conversation, guys. Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate you being here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. You actually helped me learn quite a bit because I didn't know much about ISFPs.
Perfect.
Well, Stephen, Andrea, thank you so much for joining us. And Blake, the tie, definitely necessary. Don't forget next time.
I won't, sir.
Huge mistake. I mean, the audience was extremely disappointed in your actions today. And Trey, Daniel, thanks again. And we're ending the broadcast. Thanks so much, guys, for joining us. And we'll have another live stream on Wednesday. See you then.